Here we go.
Is this it?
Pretest. Well, let's do pretest first. We can do the sheet second. So questions about that. Anybody have an issue with the pretest? We'll start with that one so we're all on the same page. Pretest. This is what was due today. Delaney.
The thickness doesn't feel right.
Which one?
Yeah, this is more of a I did have a question.
Start A.
2A? All right, the directions for 2A, that's approved. That's where you change one side into the other side. I was working on your test last night, and oh yes, you are going to have to do some of these. A couple of them are really easy. Might be challenged on one. There we go. So, Delaney, I have said this before, but it's not a huge issue a lot, so I'll say it again. When I have two sides that are almost exactly the same, but one's a plus or minus, and one's a times or divide, I always start on the plus or minus side. Because my thought pattern is this. I might change these into sines and cosines so that they are fractions, then get a common denominator, and then instead of having two terms, I'll have just one, which is what I want to have over there. So I may think of this as what? What's cotangent?
Cosine over sine.
Cosine squared over sine squared. Yep. Minus, this is just cosine squared over 1. Now, what's my common denominator?
Sine squared x.
Sine squared x. So this one's good. And this one I need to multiply by sine squared over sine squared, right? So now I realize it seems a little odd because I have a cotangent and I like to keep a cotangent, but you see I have to put these together to get one term. So now I have my two fractions combined into one fraction. Do you notice anything about the numerator?
Cosine, sine.
You can
make it a 1 minus cosine squared. Or
Well, I can
cancel it.
factor out a,
Sine squared.
I can't factor out a sine squared, but I can factor out a cosine squared. And when I factor out a cosine squared, I will be left with 1 minus sine squared. Uh-oh, what's that? That's cosine squared, so now I have cosine squared times cosine squared over sine squared. Everybody still with me?
Yeah.
Now what am I going to do with that?
You can just make the cosine squared and the sine squared a cotangent.
Exactly. I can separate this and turn this into cosine squared over 1 times cosine squared over sine squared, can I? It's a multiplication problem now. It's a times problem. Can't I do that? And then I have my cosine squared times my cotangent squared. All right, great question. Who else has one? Who else has a question?
4e.
4e. Sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. It doesn't matter what the angle is. If you have sine squared plus cosine squared, the answer is 1, period.
Good question.
Just 1. Just 1.
Basic math.
Anybody else on this pretest? Yes, Barry. 6B. This is kind of like the one I did for you on the speed dating, only it's not a half angle. This one is a double angle. So the first thing I'm going to do there, and there's two things I always start off doing problems like this. I write down the formula I'm going to use. So the formula for this is 2 tan over 1 minus tan squared. That's my formula. And then the second thing I do is draw a picture of the given. So what do I know about angle A? It is in quadrant 2. This time they just flat out tell me it's in quadrant 2. Its secant is -5/3. So I remember that secant is reciprocal of cosine. The hypotenuse is never negative, so the negative's got to go down here, even though it looks like it's on the 5. It's really on this. Then I can do my Pythagorean theorem, and that would be +4. Now, you okay with the picture? You sure? Okay. Once I have written down the formula I'm using, and I've drawn my picture, now I just take the numbers from the picture and plug them into the formula. So, what's the tangent of the angle that I've drawn here? Yep, -4/3. So I'm just plugging that into my formula. Now do the arithmetic. This would be -8/3 on the top. And this is 1 minus don't cancel these negatives, this one squares out. So that would be 1 minus 16/9. Now, you can simplify that however you want. So a choice you have, you can get a common denominator down here and figure this out and then invert and multiply. I personally just always do the same thing. I'm going to multiply everything by 9. It doesn't matter to me how you simplify it. Somehow you have to simplify this mess. I see the common denominator is 9, so I'm just going to do that. So my top is -24, and my bottom is 9 minus 16. So the answer is 24/7.
How long is the same one on the speedy quiz, right? One of these days.
Was it?
It was a different quadrant. It was negative.
Was it? I had no idea. I just made that up last night. Who knows? Yeah, probably. But good, I'm glad. So if you did your homework, you were kind of familiar with it. Kate, is that okay, Maren? Okay, Katie?
How did you know to use that formula?
Because it's on the back of your sheet.
Well, it says tan 2A. I'm finding tangent 2A. So that's 2A is a double angle. So there's only one tangent 2A formula. If it said find sine 2A, I'd use the sine 2A formula.
What was it? Tan 3A.
We don't have a formula for that. So if it were tan 3A, I'd have to do something special and fancy. Okay? I'm going to ask you things that you have formulas for.
Gotcha.
Yep. Just was an X instead of an A. Yep. All right, anything else on the pretest? Anna?
3B.
3B is a solve. Okay, this is different than the one Delaney asked about. Delaney's was change one side into the other. This one is actually solve the equation and figure out what x is. So the answer to this one is going to be x equals something degrees. That's what we're shooting for. We want to know what is the angle to this problem. And a couple days ago, or maybe, yeah, I don't remember when it was, we did a couple of equations. They were in our packet, and they look just like this. What kind of equation is this? It's quadratic. So what are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to get set equal to 0, but it already is, so then we're going to factor it. So we're going to set up 2 parentheses, and we're going to figure out what we have to FOIL together to get that. Well, it's pretty obvious that we have to have a tangent and a tangent, right? We also have 0 options. We only have 1 option, and that would be 5 and 1. No other options, because they have to multiply together to get you 5. -5. That's a DT. Okay, I need pluses and minuses, so let's see, I guess -5 plus 1, does that make sense to you? And again, if you're struggling with that, you're going to build your smile here, and you're going to FOIL it out. So this gives me a +1 tangent and a -5 tangent. That does indeed give me what I need. So then I set these equal to 0. Anna Heckman, you following along here? 7 equal to 0. This one, actually, Anna, I can do without a calculator, but this one I cannot. So I'll do this one without, but this would be a calculator problem. This says the tangent is 1. Okay, so where could, a negative 1, where could the tangent be negative? 2 and what? Yep, 2 and 4, you're exactly right. And what was your logic, Anna, for those that don't know what you were doing? The opposite over adjacent has to be negative. This is y over x, people. One has to be positive, one has to be negative, right? To get a negative answer. If the tangent is 1, you can think of that as a fraction, 1 over 1, then you know this angle is how big?
45.
45. 45 is not the answer, though. What will the answers be? Not 45, but
135.
135. That's 180 minus 45. And this one will be 315, which is 360 minus 45. This one, which quadrants is this one going to be in? It's a positive tangent. 1 and 3. And I have no idea. That triangle is not one of my special ones. So I'm going to go, and what buttons do I press? First of all, make sure you're in degrees.
Second,
And I'm going to press second tangent. Remember, whenever you want an angle on your calculator, you have to do second. So second tangent 5. This angle is about 78.7. So what would be my answers if the angle is 78.7? One of them would be 78.7 because it's right there in the first quadrant. And the other one would be 258.7, which is 180 plus 78.7. Anything else there? Okay. Oh, that's right. Today is a county day, isn't it? Give me a show of hands. How many have at least one other major test? I'm not talking about vocab quizzes and junk like that on Friday. Who has at least one other major test on Friday?
What about
Put your hand up so I can see. One other major test on Friday. Okay. I'll let you know about your tests tomorrow after I pull the rest of my class.
Make it tomorrow.
Okay. Make a test tomorrow?
I think
Okay,
Ben was trying to
what
do
about the
it.
review sheet? Who had a question about the big review sheet that you had time to finish yesterday if you wanted to? The big review sheet. Who had a question? 8. 8 is another solve. So problem 8, I'm now on the review sheet. Problem 8 is exactly like Anna Heckman's problem, except it's got a little bit of a kink at the very beginning. This. Okay?
You can just
So we have a formula for that. Actually, we have 3 of them. So we're going to pick a formula that fits with the rest of the problem. So do you know which one that would be? Cosine 2x?
let's do the cos 2 cosine.
2 cosine squared minus 1. That is the formula for cosine 2x. When you see a 2x, whether it's a tan 2x like we had earlier or a sine 2x, when you see a 2x, think formula. This one, because there's a cosine in the problem already, I'm going to use this version. There's 3 versions of this formula. I'm using this one because of that spare cosine in the problem. Now look at this problem and look at Anna Heckman's problem. They are exactly the same kind of problem. So it's already set equal to 0. It's not really in descending order, so let me rearrange the order a little bit of that equation. Then I'm gonna factor it. So I'm gonna have 2 cosine and cosine. I'm gonna have 1 and 1. Now I just need to figure out where the plus and minus are gonna go. So it looks like I need to end up, when I FOIL, there with my smile, I need to end up with a positive.
Positive and
So I'll put a positive here and a negative here, because that's gonna give me a positive 2 and a negative 1. Then I'll set them equal to 0. I'm gonna run out of time. So I get a cosine of 1/2 and a cosine of negative 1. Now remember, this one's special. I do not draw a triangle for that one. When you have sines and cosines that are 0s and 1s, you look around the circle. This one would be, I'll draw a picture just like this, only it will be in quadrants 1 and 4. It's a special angle. I'll figure out my 2 answers.
Got 45.
Okay, your homework tonight is in the book. I have picked a few problems out of the book. Remember, we're only halfway through the chapter, so there are only problems from the first half of the chapter review. Okay? I think the answers are in your packet. The answers are in your packet. So if you want to check tonight's homework, you can get the answers. They're in your packet. All right. All right. Good. John, would you turn it off? I always feel like there's like so much to say and I don't get it all.